of it. But my opinion of the project-based learning is that in the end, I do know it's better, and I do know that it takes an administrator who is open to that in order to not fault the teacher for not covering everything according to ABC of the book and of the standards, and hopefully you're hitting all the standards, but it's in a different way.
Right.
So the opinion is mixed. You've got to have the support of your administration. You've got to have a flexible mind. You've got to have a kid that is, or kids of your students who can handle this and then be able to reflect that it is indeed learning that has solidified better because of the project rather than in spite of it.
Mm-hmm. So situations would be having an administrator that is supportive.
That would be necessary because you're not going by the book that that your district or your school has just spent thousands of dollars on, and you're utilizing it in a haphazard way. I know for this quilting project that I want to do, I'm not going to be able to go through the 6th grade book for this. I'm going to have to take something from the chapter 6 and something from chapter 2 and it's going to be pretty haphazard. And as I said, I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to assess it. So that's a conversation that I do want to have with my administrator at some point.
And are there any events that influenced your opinion of project-based learning?
Well, the exhibitions is the quintessential event that says the kids have learned, looks great to the parents, but more than that, the children can really explain how they did things, and they have a deeper understanding of what they did by doing, rather than by just learning and taking a test on it.
Right. Thank you. And number 5.
What factors influence the instruction of middle school math students? Well, generally, the factors that influence the instruction happen to be the standards, the textbook, the amount of time allocated to math instruction, and that's it, part and parcel of that. And the factors influence the instruction using project-based learning are much more flexible, not put in a box easily. It's like I said, it's harder to see where the lines are and where they're not. But I think that I think it's better. I know it's better, but I also know it's harder. And in the difficulty of it, sometimes the instruction might not perfectly touch on this particular standard or that particular aspect of the standard or whatever, or it might miss something. Then you have to go back and do it later in something else. I don't think you can, I don't think I could, I'll put it that way, I don't think I could completely disband the textbook. Certainly can't disband the standards, would be hung and whipped. But I think that it's better in the long run. Though, like I said, what would it be? The evidence is a little unclear sometimes. It's clearer in that it's a thing that you can show in the end, but unclear in that everything be touched on. I was really impressed last year with the 8th grade group that did the falling objects kind of carousel thing. And
the roller coasters?
The roller coasters, yes. I knew it had something to do with a theme park. Because when they were doing it, it was like they were just playing. And at the end of it, it's just seeing everything labeled so well and the math clearly delineated, I think really saved that project for me as a observer. Because otherwise it was hard to determine what really they had done other than fold a bunch of pieces of paper.
Great. And number 6.
Given your experiences, what are the benefits of PBL for middle school math students? What are the liabilities?
And it's okay if you repeat some of what you've said.
Okay, well, the benefits, as I mentioned, I think is a deeper sense of learning things in the real world, which is applied math, which is probably more important than theoretical math, even though I love theoretical math. That's kind of what I was raised on. And I find it fun and enjoyable, but it's the real world application that I see. Like, when we go out sailing and I see the real world application, I'm like, Don doesn't know about math in the way that I do. He sees these totally different. His is totally applied, and mine is, well, let's see, let's theoretically, okay, this is how it works. Oh, yeah, you're right. And the liabilities are the difficulties with the same things we talked about, the assessments, the determining that you've done everything you need to do, and making sure that everything kind of aligns itself to the standards, and it's really a touch as it applies rather than your regimented following of a curriculum.
And earlier you mentioned some challenges that might happen with groups when they're working in groups.
When they're working with groups, sometimes you have certain kids doing more than the others.
Yeah.
And when they're working alone, you don't have them maybe doing enough to make sense. I think that ideally what would be best is working alone but sharing, which I tried to do last year with the 8th graders. I just don't feel like there was enough of that. And once again, we were boxed in with a curriculum that we needed to get through. I have to get through this book. So and this happened to be a project-based math project that was an add-on. Not an add-on as much as a side-by-side. Like, we've been doing all this stuff. We have all this math vocabulary. Now let's find it in the real world, and let's build a storyline, a project, or a problem that relates to this. So it wasn't specifically, okay, you have to do this page and this number of problems, but they still had to do this page and this number of problems. So in that way, it was an add-on. And I think that was not the ideal situation. And if I had more time or to experiment with that more, I think I would have done much more sharing, so that every day somebody shared something and made sense, and we tweaked it right there, because even though some of that was done, the tweaking of it did not happen the way I had anticipated, and some of the evidence was not clear and adequate.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Number 7.
What conditions encourage or prevent you or others from using PBL in your math classes? I think I've already said it's the difficulty with creating it, assessing it, going along and having it make sense throughout the time period that you're doing your project. The encouragement is the degree of buy-in that you have with students. They're much more involved and happier to be doing that, and that's what I'm hoping as I'm going into this next idea that I have. I'm hoping that that's going to be the case, because it's with a student who really needs to understand more life skills, and I think that the making of a quilt would create some of those life skills, purchasing of things, measuring of things, understanding area and perimeter of different shapes. It also allows me to do ratios and proportions. Red in this, if you do full area, do the area of different parts, and you add them together or put them together, you'll be able to get these ratios and proportions that will be much better than, I think, learning just from the book. And I can do even fractions, ratios, and decimals and percents in a way that is different than filling in a chart, which I have done plenty of those. And I think the chart is important because it helps kids to actually do that kind of calculation. But unless it's